welcome. Before we get going, let me just say that this webinar is on mute, so none of our participants are able to speak up. If you do have questions, please use the Q&A function down at the bottom of the screen. And this particular show is being recorded and will be shared and rebroadcast or reposted on the EMSNOW website here within the week. So look for that too. With that out of the way, hello, I'm Eric Miscoll. I'm the publisher of EMSNOW, and welcome to the Virtual Eric Miscoll Show. This is actually the fourth one that we have done, and this has become a every 2-week event for us since the pandemic began, and has led to some very interesting and fruitful discussions. And I think we'll continue in that vein here today. For those of you joining us, thank you for taking your time to join us for this industry discussion. Before I introduce my guests, let me just say I've been actually looking forward to this discussion since we got it all organized, because I think it's going to, you know, over the last many shows, we've talked about the impact of COVID and what's going on in the industry in a lot of different regions. And we've always referred to Asia, but today we actually have 2 Asian-based companies speaking to kind of boots on the ground what's happening there. Although both gentlemen and both companies are global and are involved globally in it, I think we'll get some great insight on what's happening in some specific countries over there. So with that said, let me just introduce my guest today. Mr. Arthur Tan is the CEO of IMI, which is Integrated Microelectronics Incorporated. It's a top 50 global EMS company headquartered in the Philippines. We also have Mr. Howell Wang joining us. Howell is the founder and CEO of Insight Solutions based in China. Insight Solutions is a company that helps global brands create manufacturing and supply chain solutions. Before we get going into the, and as always, we have Phil Stoughton, my co-host. He is in Australia today, joining us this morning. So thank you again, Phil, for your collaboration on these. Let's begin. I'm going to ask each of our guests to kind of introduce kind of a summary of your company for those people who just may not really know who you are. So Arthur, maybe you could start.
All right. Thank you, Eric. And hello, gentlemen. So glad to be in this historic webinar with Eric. But just to give a brief, IMI is a publicly listed company. We're in the EMS. I think we ranked 17th or 18th last year, top EMS in the country, in the world. And so we're headquartered here in the Philippines with about 5 different factories, but we are actually a global company. We operate about 21 different factories in 10 countries globally. So we serve all the major markets, both in the European market, the North American market, and of course in Asia with China plus one strategy, where we have factories in China as well as here. Our plus one is here in the Philippines. So in essence, we closed the year last year at about $1.3 billion in total revenue, and about close to 45% of that is related to the automotive electronics industry. Mm. And as you know, that's one of the ones that are actually affected during this time. The other part of our market that we serve are the industrial sector, the telecom sector, and in some levels now, I guess by definition, is the medical sector. So, and that's really what we are. We have about 20,000 employees globally, and so this issue on keeping all our employees safe and manage
it's huge.
This pandemic is definitely a challenge, and each policy of each government that we have to adhere to, and still on top of that figure out how we can be able to address the supply chain for the rest of the world, is also another challenge. So I'll leave it at that, and then I'm looking forward to a very fruitful and open discussion.
Very good. Howell, please.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. It's very glad to join this webinar. Inside Solutions actually is a supply chain services company. We do two things. One is serving supplier sourcing needs. Another is act as clients boots on the ground to manage the supply chain and resolve manufacturing issues. We both serve global big clients like Google, Waymo, Honeywell, Intel. We help them to, do all of the quality control, and also we help them, like Honeywell, to qualify the licensee brands factories. So these are big brands, but also most of our clients are startups, especially from Silicon Valley. We served more than 120 startups in the past 5 years. Most of them are high-tech companies, including medical, automotive, consumer electronics for sure. Our team actually, especially after this, pandemic happens, then our team, as extended team of our clients, to stay in the factory day to day to run the operations, manage all of the deliverables, review the anticipate the issues, and resolve the problems on the ground, so that customer would not be blocked by the travel limits. And this is what a customer really appreciate recently. We have a team in States, in Suzhou, Shanghai, in China, in Shenzhen, Hong Kong.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating, isn't it? That they basically, if you can't get there, you need to find someone that's already there. And you're certainly fulfilling an immediate requirement there. Arthur, I just wanted to follow up on your introduction. Can you give me a kind of highlights of where your main facilities are outside of the Philippines? I know you've got Guadalajara in Mexico. Where else?
Well, the second largest footprint we would have would be in China. So we have 5 factories in China. And then the next one would be, I would say, in Eastern Europe, would be in Bulgaria. We have a facility in Czech Republic, in Serbia. And then we have engineering centers in Germany as well. And the one for North America will be out of Guadalajara, which is the largest footprint. And then we have small, very prototyping and engineering development out of Justin in California.
Oh, okay.
So these are the different sites. And then spattered all over would be engineering support services that comes out of Japan and so on. Oh, I forgot. Yeah. We do have 2 factories in Japan. Oof.
Yeah.
We have factories in Japan as well. Yes.
Yeah, you don't want to forget those. So how has the impact of COVID kind of, what's the domino effect as it's shifted through all those different nations for you?
Well, the domino effect, one thing that is happening, and this is really what's causing part of this aberration for the whole dynamic of the supply chain, is that the countries are actually entering and exiting this COVID pandemic in different cycles. And as we know, when you're working on a global basis and you're producing in a global manner, the supply chain is actually interconnected. And so as soon as one of these cycles, one of these countries, so when China first entered it, it affected quite a bit of manufacturing globally, right? Because China already produces certain parts that only about 80% or 60% of the total world supply comes out of China for that particular component. And so but then when China came out and then the United States and Mexico started going in, then it's just trickled effect. So the overall dynamic, the effect, is that it actually delays the internal global consumption numbers because it limits us from being able to source from specific countries. And then when they start closing borders, they allow you
Yeah.
to manufacture, but the borders are closed, so you can't move the goods in between even countries. So that creates that problem. So I think that's
Yeah.
really where I see
Well, it's
that
worked its way around.
as long as we have these cycles propagating through different markets, and if you turn up to be that industry that you're tied to is dependent on that particular supply chain for those countries, then you will be affected. And those that are not,
Yeah.
are not, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the telecom market seems to be doing well
Yeah.
overall. And as we know, it's just a technology discussion at that point. Our largest telecom business is out of Huawei. And so we continue to produce significantly for the 5G network. And I think that will continue to be driven, and it's
Yeah.
going to be good. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of what you talk about there is supply chain disruption, and that wave is still occurring. So we don't know where that's going to finish. It's still unpredictable. But on top of that strange wave, you've got the demand disruption. And you mentioned earlier that a lot of your business is in automotive, and people basically haven't been out to buy cars recently. So that's got its own challenge. And I guess some of that can be redeployed into medtech. Are you actually involved in some of the kind of ventilator projects or PPE projects, or any of the large kind of frontline fight against COVID projects?
Yeah, we are. In fact, our division in the UK, so that's the other one I forgot. We do have factories in the UK. So our division in the UK, actually, if you remember, the UK had this ventilator challenge where Dyson got involved and everybody got involved. So eventually it all feathered down. Somebody won, and the UK government stopped all the others, and it was the Penlon ventilator that actually got the go-ahead signal for 15,000 of those to be deployed. And the manufacturing of those Penlon ventilators are actually within IMI in SDI.
Oh, okay.
So that's our PPE or our ventilator angle on that one. And then a lot of the US supply chain for Baxter, for the PPE and everything else, a lot of their control systems also are actually manufactured through our system. So we're helping out in that way. Yeah. But I think the thing that we're seeing now, where I see a lot more movement, is towards the sensor side of the business. So a lot of automation, sensor, nobody wants to touch a door anymore. So we're going to have to go with those sensors together.
Yeah.
And so that's driving it. And on the auto side, what I see is that the drive for self-automation is actually accelerating.
Yeah.
Primarily, I think we're going to move to a transition into a mobility area where we're not going to be dependent on another human being driving it for us.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That kind of multimodal thing. Howell, from your point of view, have you seen that double impact of supply first, but now real shifts in demand, and kind of what highlights have you seen?
Yes, actually, the real impact is, the long-term impact for the future. Lots of, suppliers are thinking about the tension of trade war, and also this post-pandemic era, what the supply chain look like. In short term, they were impacted, but they still have some orders to produce, so they are able to survive for a while. But for, low core competence factories like, pure CNC without any core competence inside, then they face big problems. What's the next step? What client they are going to serve? What capabilities, especially the manufacturing process, machines, and the sub-supply chain, how it would be redesigned. They are thinking of this problem. Some of them have moved the production to inland China because this is the simplest and safest way for them to survive. Just reduce labor cost and landed facility cost immediately. and moving to Thailand, to Philippines, move to Vietnam, different options. Some entrepreneurs, they are taking action to plan, visit these facilities in in short term, if these countries can give access to them. Previously, they were thinking about this. Some of them visited these facilities in overseas China, but they are not really taking action to move production.
Yeah.
But now it's becoming more urgent for them to reduce the risk.
Done.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Hey, before we move into some of the other related issues here, I want to cycle back real quick to Arthur, because I had a question posed by somebody who wanted specifically for you. He wanted to hear from you about how the EMS business, specifically in the Philippines, is doing in the wake of both the COVID-19, but also the US-China trade tensions.
Well, on the U.S.-China trade tension, as you know, the Philippines is one of those in the list that gets the benefit of that sort, because it's an easy transfer, and the dynamics of China and the Philippines is actually fairly positive right now from a government perspective. So the challenge that we have right now is that the Philippines itself, and the way that the country has decided to manage the medical situation that we have, and how to manage that, which is now morphing into an economic issue, right? As well as for other countries as well. Mm-hmm. And so that's the challenge that we have, is that the country is predominantly tied to certain types of industry, which is a service-backed industry rather than a manufacturing-backed industry. So from a service-backed industry, where we have a significant amount of BPO, for example, and IT-related banking and so on, that is being challenged. But the other part there is the manufacturing part, and on the manufacturing part, we are able to continue to manufacture through this pandemic. Although as we discussed earlier, it's been a little bit more challenging, because the restrictions that the government has placed on us was not only do we have to provide private shuttle to all of these employees that are moving back and forth, but since we're going to be responsible for their health care, we have to, what we decided in IMI in the Philippines is we actually created and housed all of these workers as much as we can inside the factory and operate there. Now, the good news is that we do have customers that understand this limitation and has actually helped us cover some of the expenses of this. We do know that it's not sustainable, and this is something that needs to be managed. And we're working very closely with the policy-making group of the government so that we can ensure the safety, the health, but at the same time, we continue to be, especially China, where there's no more social distancing restrictions and everything else. So,
okay, very good, thank you.
Yeah, it's kind of a curious challenge, isn't it? Because you had all the tension with the trade wars and the tariffs before. You've got this, and now you've got supply chains. How will you talk about people coming to you and saying, "Hey, this is a kind of an accelerant. We need to finally move that supply chain that we've been talking about moving forever." But it's a chain. It's not that simple. You can't just pull one part of a chain and put it somewhere and not expect the rest of it to be kind of pulled along behind it. It's complex. Is it something that you're finding is kind of in your sweet spot of solutions and now in high demand?
Yeah, actually, just yesterday, I got a client. We had a very good discussion about the global supply chain network, how it will look like, what's the best way to run the operations for the next 3 years, which cost is very sensitive. So we do a kind of a matrix to benchmark all of the data what's the short-term needs, what's the long-term needs, what's the fixed cost, what's the variable cost. So we did a lot of, analysis, and hopefully, they will, change the way originally they designed. And this is, a kind of example that some of our other clients are also raising the question and want to have further cooperation with us to either, one, review the risks of the existing supply chain, two, help them to do the transition, moving manufacturing to Philippines, Thailand, or US or Mexico, other contract manufacturing partners. So we are working with, firstly, some EMS factories who has global footprints existed already, because this can solve the problem immediately, rather than selecting some factories they have planned, but a lot of things are pending. So I think we will help them to do the analysis, visit these suppliers,
make the right choice.
Yes, help them to pick the right supplier and give them advice how to do.
Yeah, and then help them manage that transition. Arthur, are you seeing, because you have a global footprint, are you seeing people say, hey, all that stuff we're manufacturing in plant A, how much of that can you shift to plant B, or can we have it in plant B, C, and D, because we need to know that we've got resilience? Is the way supply chain managers are thinking changing, or are they still kind of panicking and reeling and managing what's urgent?
Well, primarily it was already started during the trade war, right? When the trade war happened, and then we started to go get creative. The other part there is that we've had over the years, and we've been in business for over 40 years, so we've had a lot of these external aberrations that have caused some supply chain issues along the way. Whether it was a fire in a Panasonic plant that kind of shut down all the batteries in the world, or and so on. You remember all of that, right? Or the Fukushima event, or something happens, and we now have to readjust the supply chain. So one of the critical elements that we've actually implemented for years now, for decades, is what we call a business continuity plan scenario, where we make sure that there's some level of standardizations in all our factories, that we are able to actually requalify certain products out of different parts. Now, granted, there are specific skill sets and capabilities that each of these factories have, and their location to where the next supply chain is, or where the factory is, that you cannot just arbitrarily move it without any undue cost. So those have to play a factor. But you're right. There have been a significant amount of interest in this type of finding out what other options do we have, if see that this shift, this paradigm shift happening on a global basis because of government policy, that regionalization of your manufacturing footprint becomes much more important now than a globalized footprint. And so Europe for Europe, North America for North America, and the rest of the world for China and Asia. So we're seeing that, and we're making sure that we remain valid and relevant to that particular space.
It seems coming out of that the current industry buzzwords seem to be around reshaping and diversification of the supply chain and the supply solution, right? And I noted today that we saw a couple of kind of postings. One, the chairman of Hun Hai says that decentralized production would be the new focus in manufacturing, right? The chairman over at who was it, at Kiza, I think it was, stated that risk diverting strategies that involve production relocations become important, And then you have India saying that they're planning to become the next manufacturer. It's going to be their top industry, right? And they're going to invest in that. So So how do you see this kind of as it's all moving around and doing this? What are your opinions of these and how these are changing and what you're talking about? It's all in line with what you said. It's not just because of the pandemic. It follows a whole litany of disruptors to the industry.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating, Eric, because I think a couple of things I would just draw out of that. One is India is going to be the next China. Has been something that should be a hashtag because I've heard it. I've heard it for 20 years, and I think there are some challenges there, but I think there are some really interesting opportunities. And then the other thing I think is super ironic is the very people that are on earnings calls at the moment, the analysts and journalists that are on those calls saying, hey, you shouldn't be dependent on China, were the people that were on those calls 15 years ago saying, hey, you should be manufacturing in China. That'll improve your bottom line. Very, very strange times, but you're absolutely right. It is time for that reanalysis of the supply chain and kind of that vision of a post-pandemic world and what that might look like. What do you see as the outcome of that, guys? I mean, I don't know if Howell or Arthur, you want to start, but how do you see that? How do you see that debate going, and how do you see it panning out? Who wants to go first?
I'll let Howell say something, and then I'll jump in.
Okay. Thank you, Arthur. Actually, you know, the sub-supply chain, I think it's the most challenged one, you know, critical point. And I see, for example, like yesterday, we are talking about, you know, the sub-supply chain. What are your critical components? He said the LCD, batteries, antennas, those, you know, component manufacturing capabilities is not going to be built in, you know, one day. And it really takes time, not about, you know, investment, about the money, but also about, you know, the technicians, engineers, experience, accumulation, and also the sub-supply chain of the LCD batteries. So it's a very long way to go. But I think, you know, either India or other countries, I think you know, leaders, they are considering of this. I think they are, you know, going to take some action. And some of the LCD battery factories, they are also looking at the trend of the global demands, how it will look like. So they do reanalyze, you know, the demand of Apple, of big brands, or even, you know, some ODM products. They are talking to the customer directly, how they would expect, and what's the good, you know, impact to the clients. So suppliers care more about, you know, the long relationship with clients, other than, okay, limit that into China, use their own resources and the facility. They would, you know, scattered their supply chain to benefit for both parties for long term. So I think lots of, you know, factory owners, they are rethinking about what the long benefits it should be. Yeah, Arthur.
Arthur, what do you think on this?
Good. Very good. So and that's a very good indication for the supply chain level. Let me just try to see if I could give a bit different view, which is from the supply, from the demand side. From the demand side part of it, where the customers are the one now looking and figuring out how am I going to be able to manage this supply chain issue, and on top of that, my own consumption problems, where how am I going to generate the revenue for where my products are going to go and how are they going to get there. So you're right, India continues to be that potential, and I'm with you. I've been looking at that potential for quite some time, and maybe now it's going to happen. Why do I feel that there is a possibility that India would finally break that threshold of moving from a software-based economy to a hardware-based economy? Is because of the way the rest of the world is acting. So the Huawei experience is a significant transition point for every product owner, because now they see that if they do become successful in their industry and able to have a product that can be a game changer for that industry, your access to your supply chain is now critical. Then there are other variables that you have to worry about, and not just being able to pick the right partner or pick the right supply chain or pick the right location. It's actually picking the right country that you're dealing with. Because as we can see, policies can change, and overnight governments can institute shutdowns. This, and I'm not just speaking of the United States. This happened between Japan and Korea as well, right? So a government then imposing the barter of their goods and services to these countries, and this allowing them to use the components in another companies, specifically company, and not even a country. So we're moving from a sovereign issue to meddling it with a corporate issue. And I think this is the new dynamic. So I call it, I don't think that we actually have a view of what this new normal is, but I have this professor from Harvard, Ranjay Gupta, who coined this perfect phrase: we are actually in the new abnormal.
Right.
Because we don't know what the normal is yet.
Right.
So we're actually in this cycle, and even the pandemic itself, it's 6 months old. I mean, any statistical analysis that we're seeing of how this is going to unfold is based on data that only been accumulated over the last 6 months. So that's really not that much. And so I think the way that we are managing it is that we look at certain, trends and facts that we're hanging our hat on. Number one, do we believe that, for example, that China, India, North America, Asia in itself, and Europe will continue to be a dominant market in itself? And we do. And therefore, from our geographical presence perspective, we have to figure out how, if we were to then engage with these global brands, they too will have to go figure out how to supply into that consumer base without jeopardizing their supply. And so we have to be able to provide that, right? So that's one way that we're looking at that. Then the next one is, moving forward, are we even in the right industry? And we take a position that we are, because more and more, I don't see how we're going to be able to function, humanity be able to function in this world without electronics.
Yeah. We need more of it right now, don't we? We need more of it right now.
And more of it
Zoom
right now.
meeting is a good example.
Look at this. Look at how we're functioning now, right? So more and more electronics will play a factor. And so within that space, and electronics is so wide, which ones do we believe in? Well, we believe in one is in industrial. We believe that certain mobility will be required. I mean, this is good. But at the end of the day, if I'm going to transact $1 billion, I want to see your eyes.
Across the table, not just on camera.
See your eyes across the table. I want to have a feel before that happens. So mobility is going to happen. It's going to happen in a different way, because as we found out also with this pandemic, supply chain, foods, services, they have to continue. When you stop that, riots happen. People have to eat, and so this is the overall view that we're seeing. And this why, I mentioned earlier, I see this actually. I see more opportunities that is actually coming down the pipe than there are just to deal with.
Yeah, no, I think it's fascinating what you say, and I think there are a few dynamics at play there. You talk about this. This idea of shifting geographies, of shifting ideas. There's a certainty that there's going to be demand in the future. It's going to be in all kinds of different places. And there's kind of an ideal of the supply chain, not that we want in the future, but really we should have now, that would have been better to service the market during the pandemic. And we also have that dynamic of complete unpredictability. We don't know where we are in this story. We don't know whether we're at the beginning, the middle, or towards the end. So we have to, and we don't know what the next disruption will be. It could be a Fukushima-like disruption. It could be another pandemic. It could be weather-related. It could be a whole bunch of things. So we're preparing for the unknown. So in doing that, we can't design the ideal supply chain, but perhaps what we can do is build systems that give us the ability to move very, very quickly. And for me, that's why I think we're hearing more about the word resilience. That comes up constantly, but I'm also hearing that combined with agility, the idea that supply chains, manufacturing ecosystems need to be super agile and able to move quickly. Do you guys see that as a transition that people are aware of and want to make? Do you see yourself accelerating maybe digital transformation to do that? Arthur, from a point of view of a large corporate like IMI.
Yes. Well, the thing is, it's a minimum requirement for us to be able to operate all these different factories, time zones, and systems, right? So the factory of the world was where it started, and then it morphed itself into Industry 4.0. Everybody's jumping up and down now that we need full automation. But I think before we even get to full automation, I think there will be the Internet of Things that's going to happen that will then connect everything to at least an availability to be able to access data at any point, at any time, real time. So I think that has to transition first. The automation itself, and I've been in this business long enough to understand that automation has its place. And then you move into now what we call mass customization, where each of the consumers we have right now, because of their ability to just look at a wider breadth of products globally, are now demanding that the ones that they want is specific to them. Right? Because if automation is really the key, then Hermes will be dead. And yet there's a 5-year wait for a Birkin bag.
There you go.
And that has not stopped. That has not stopped through this pandemic. There's still a 5-year wait on a Birkin bag. So there's products and services that will line itself up well, and that's where the CEOs have to decide strategically whether that's their business and whether that's the market. Is this the market they want to go into? Is this the product that they want to serve? And then therefore they have to now understand that there are limitations that you have to deal with in order to produce that product. But in essence, what we adhere to, at least in IMI, we believe in a very hybrid level of manufacturing, that there are certain level of skill set that is necessary at a human level for me to be able to do it. You know, the best example I could give would be, if a customer calls me and says, you know what, switch the green wire to a red wire because my customers don't like green, and do it now. If I were to go back into the line and reprogram a fully automated line just so that it will pick a red wire now from a green wire, you know how long that will take? Versus me going on a PA system and telling all the operators, okay, you see the green wire? Put that away. You see the red wire? Put that on. And automatically it's shifted, right? So I'm being fictitious, but you see the value proposition is depending on the product and where the services is needed.
And accelerating those processes. And Howell, when you look at that from supply chain, are people looking for, when they talk to you about moving stuff, are they looking for a more systemized approach? Do they want to know that not just you're shifting it now, but you're actually transforming it in a way that it can be shifted and moved and adjusted for the next disruption?
Yes, actually, lots of big suppliers, they have all of the agility digitalization capabilities to serve clients' needs. But some small or medium factories, their digitalization situation is not good yet. So they are preparing a very good manufacturing execution system to enable clients to get the real-time testing data, quality year rates data. This is a kind of immediate needs from the clients because previously they still can travel here, stay on the ground to work with them shoulder by shoulder. But now this is becoming very urgent. Also some FAI data, some lab data, they need to establish this connection and use a certain system to transit the data to clients in real time. Another is the project communication. Originally, they probably just use a conference call or just Excel or email, but now they are using more digital platform, share folders, share files, share documents in real time. And also clients can work with them with, kind of like teamwork. So I think that digitalization will becoming more and more popular.
Yeah, and becoming the norm.
Let me ask though, I mean, one of the realities coming out of everything we've been going through for the last many months is a lot of companies are cash strapped. Their revenues and profits are down. So what impact will that have on the investments that electronic manufacturing companies will be able to make? And there's an expectation that they're doing this, but there's costs associated with that too.
Yeah.
So how do you see that playing out? Maybe Arthur, we talked about that a little before, but maybe start with you.
Yes, definitely. So we're going to see some movement there. There's going to be a significant consolidation that's going to happen, but that consolidation actually is going to happen on both sides, because we're going to see that you see all the downgrading of even the large customers that we have been downgraded on a credit basis. So that's putting cash crunch on their side as well. I remember when this pandemic started, everybody started flying out force majeure letters to everybody that they know, right? And so, and these are even large customers. And so I think that is true. And so what we're going to see is, like I said, the status quo will be completely taken out. Everybody will be looking at reestablishing a new set of parameters, partners, systems, and also a way of being able to handle their financials. The banks, all the governments are flooding the market with money, but then telling the banks that once you lend the money, you are not supposed to take any of the interest. And so what does the bank do? They're not lending, right? And at the same time, they're trying to cover their risk, because the government is only going to cover their risk profile for the next 3 months. But these loans are going to extend to years. And so that's something that we need to go figure out. So I think you're right. And what we've done internally is just to keep our powder dry. We made sure that our cash position is strong, that we can weather a significant aberration both on the supply chain side as well as on the revenue side. And that's going to play out down the line, right? Yeah. And I think that this is going to be the next wave. So you were telling me, you were mentioning earlier, Phil, about maybe there's going to be a next pandemic or anything. I don't think we're off this one yet. So we're just on the first wave. There probably will be a second wave, and the second wave will be not just the medical part of it, but the second wave of the economic part of it.
Yeah.
When the government can no longer print money.
Yeah.
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 And
no, it's a strange situation.
Right.
Yeah, and it certainly impacts how you can invest. And I think maybe some of the solutions I'm seeing coming out from vendors are these as a service models, where they can approach you from an OPEX point of view rather than a CAPEX point of view. Exactly. And having spoken to a lot of CEOs, I know their boards are putting on the pressure on them to actually hold any CAPEX. And as you say, you're keeping your powder dry. But if you've got a as a service solution that has a clear short-term ROI, and maybe it's just the GM of a particular facility that's able to do that, then I think those kinds of digital transformations are perhaps going to happen. But yeah, that whole second wave of the economic impact is going to be huge.
Yeah.
And I think that just to add, so on your point regarding the OPEX and the CAPEX, the best ones that I've seen so far that has embraced that and is in China.
Really? So Chinese companies offering automation as a service, that software as a service? Yeah.
Forward thinking,
that's fascinating.
And how this business is going to be, and able to transition and then into an operating lease environment rather than a financial lease environment very quick. Everybody else, the rest of the world is taking its time.
Is way behind.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's important for you.
Yeah.
Oh, where are you? It's been good. Bring you in on this.
Yeah, actually, I see lots of companies are reviewing the CapEx as well, OPEX. And the immediate thing they are doing is to cut some resources that is not very efficient, and review existing the manufacturing process, quality control process, try to change that into a lean one so that they can fulfill the needs from the clients, but also can reduce their cost. Another thing, like what Arthur just mentioned, lots of companies are investing more on software and good skills engineers as well. And another thing, what I saw recently is some small factories, they are looking at opportunities to partnership with some association, and these associations are organizing these small companies to form as a kind of a big group that they can utilize each other's machines, resources. They do have the individual clients, but some of the capabilities they would share each other's capabilities other than invest by themselves, because this forces them to get together other than previously they compete with each other.
Right.
Very good.
Competition.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm cognizant of the time, and I know that we're stretching this a bit beyond, but we could probably go on much longer. We always tend to try to end with a not so heavy subject, but I'd imagine looking at you both seem to be in your homes, and you both are fully engaged running a worldwide, company, and Arthur's and Howell managing your teams and all your clients. But how else are you surviving during lockdown? Are you doing anything fun? Are you binge watching anything? What are you?
Yes, that happens afterward. But the upside for me on a personal basis is that I've always wanted to try this intermittent fasting. I finally was able to do it. So, when I have full control over my time, what I eat, and all of this is because when I was traveling, it was very difficult, right? You can't do it.
Yeah.
Now, 2 months is lock in. I'm very happy. I've got my weight.
Well, you look great, Arthur. I guess it's working.
It's working. Thank you. So that's the upside. That's what I've been doing.
Good. How about you?
Yeah, actually, it's good for me because, I can, in early morning time is almost evening time of my clients. So they want to have a conference calls. I don't want to be stuck on the road to the office. And this is good. Also, another thing is that, lots of our people in the office, they would not see I came there earlier because they can come there earlier. And I can go later.
There you go. So the commute's gone. That's definitely good news, and people seem to be fixing stuff up at home and taking good care of themselves. So yeah, it's all good.
Good. Oh, good. Well, listen, let me just end by thanking both of you gentlemen, Arthur and Howell. This very, very insightful, great commentary. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us today. Phil, you too, for getting up early out there in Australia with
Yeah.
You're welcome.
close there. And for those of you who are watching, thank you for taking the time to join us today. We are doing this on an every 2-week basis, and I think we have confirmation that the next one in 2 weeks will involve executives from both Bright Machines and Fictive. So that should be a very good conversation as well. So everybody stay safe out there. And gentlemen, again, thank you very much for spending the day with us here today. Thank you.